It's Spouse Day. I see Susan Stockdale on too.
It's a family affair.
Support.
Hi, Todd.
Hi, how are you, Martha? Welcome.
Thank you.
Nice to see you. And congratulations again.
I'm very happy to be here. Yes.
Great.
Yeah.
I'd say, yeah.
Okay, so it's 7:30. I'd like to call the meeting to order.
Jeff is just getting on right now, so just give it
Hold on a
1
minute,
second. There we go.
Jeff.
Yep.
Okay,
All
hi,
right.
Jeff. Okay, so I guess we'll have Keith's weather report in a few minutes.
Yeah.
We'll give him a chance to arrive in person so we can hear it right from Keith. And at this point, there's an opportunity to hear resident comments.
So
Do we just chime in? Or?
so anyone who'd like to speak, just to clarify, because of the council's decision to withdraw the sign ordinance, there's no public hearing, so the previous speakers list was just for that event. So if anyone would like to speak now, they can speak. Okay, so you can go from there.
Hi, I'm Phil Urban. Can you guys hear me?
Yes. Hi, Phil.
Terrific. I'll be very brief. Obviously, many of us are pleased you guys withdrew that ordinance, at least for now. You know that many of us felt it was terribly inappropriate. I'm not going to take any of your time now to talk about why, but I do think that the process surrounding it both showed what a robust and incredible conversation we can have as a neighborhood, and unveiled another problem that I'd like to bring to your attention really quickly, which is that many of us opposed this ordinance because we felt that it had the opportunity to silence voices. But for many of us, the voices have been the most silent through this whole process have been yours, those of you on the council, and that has been troubling. In the midst of this lively, robust conversation, I kept asking everybody, why is nobody from the council chiming in? Why is nobody responding to my emails? They said, well, it's the policy not to respond to the listserv. No, really? Because for better or for worse, in these horribly isolated times, that listserv is our public square.
Okay,
And
but
for your policy to be not to step into the public square seems to me to fly in the face of everything you said to us when you asked us for your votes. We have no idea why this ordinance was proposed. We have no idea why it's been withdrawn. We have no idea whether it's coming back. The silence on this has been deafening and very not Martin's additions to us. So in this moment, very briefly, this moment of terrible isolation for all of us, I think you ought to consider whether the deafening silence on this matter, that is the policy, is really what makes the village work best. These are lonely times, and to have this conversation in the absence of the very people we look to help us through the problems we have is just wrong. So I wanted to take a minute to invite you to put that policy aside and to join us, not here, not now, but out there in the public square.
So I'd like to respond to that. As a council member, two things. One is that you misread what Susan had sent out, you said that we don't respond. We read everything. Our responses are, when we respond, it's like this, in a council meeting. Some of us did respond, but remember, this is a privately managed listserv. Our responses were not carried by the list manager. So go talk to the list manager about the policy of who they allow to speak on the listserv.
I will respectfully say that many folks on the listserv said, why was this proposed? Who on the council proposed this? What is the reason for it? And as far as I can tell, nobody came to that listserv publicly, privately, in any way to say, I'm on the council, I have something to say to you because you voted for me and I would like to talk to you. I emailed everybody on the council several times. Nobody emailed me back. I've been on this listserv, everybody. Nobody stopped in to say, here's what's going on. So even though you may have reason for, and even you may have policy for not speaking up more, you all have the opportunity, like I did, to sign on as a private citizen to that thing and say, hey, I'm a council member. I hear you guys are talking. Can I join you? And that's what I think you ought to be doing.
Bill, we did, as I said, listen some more. We did send, several of us did send in messages, and the listserv did not carry them.
But we actually do have a policy of not responding to the listserv messages because oftentimes they are direct attacks, oftentimes they are not civil. We have no control over the content. So if we
have been enormously civil, and one of you could have responded and sent an email to all of us saying, in the face of all of this voice, we don't think it's appropriate to wait for a meeting to talk to our neighbors, because the formality of that flies in the face of everything I've loved about this village. For the 20 years I've lived here off and on.
Okay.
This is where I bought my first house, and this is where I'm living now. And I hope to come back here again after my kid goes to college. And this is not how we should be with each other. It shouldn't take me this long to still not know why the hell this thing came up in the first place. I'll stop.
If I might just address how it came up in the first place, did you check out the minutes from the meeting at which it was introduced, or the previous meeting at which the need for a proposed ordinance was
Clearly,
suggested?
many of us didn't.
Okay. Well, they're always available online shortly after the meetings are conducted.
And if this is how the village wants to be, well, if you want to hear from us, you should go on the website and look at the meetings, because I'm incapable of speaking to my neighbors. That's not what Martin's Edition is about. Go back and look at the minutes of the meeting from a month ago. Really, that's how you want to talk to me?
No, it's fine to call. Just don't expect us to communicate through a listserv that we don't manage. Ron, would you like to address the legalities of entertaining this conversation?
Give me 1 second, okay?
Sorry, I'm happy
Ron,
to chime in here.
Ron, hey, Ron, before you do the legalities, I just want to say one thing. This is Jeff Landy here, and I'm on the council as well. And I do want to just put a different perspective on this as well, is that, and again, everyone has their different, how should I say, they've had their different experiences, perhaps, with the listserv and other things, but I think actually the listserv for me is a sort of, please, if you're not speaking, please put yourself on mute.
No,
Thank you.
it's,
Okay, perfect. All right.
Okay.
it's not.
So I just want to say, from my perspective, I'm a newbie, and I respect everyone on the council. And Phil, I really greatly appreciate your thoughts, because for me, the listserv has been a vibrant community, and it's, from my perspective, has always been civil. And in fact, anytime I posted a note as a resident, it's been very thoughtful. And when I posted something recently, I had some very good positive comments to it. So I think there are different perspectives here, but I agree. And perhaps after Ron maybe chiming in, I think we have to think perhaps in a positive tone, as you're saying. This was a moment that engaged many people. You normally don't get this many people on a call like this. And how do we address really, I think, the gap that everyone is feeling, which is how do we have more engagement between the council and the community on a regular basis, and let's solve that problem, as opposed to getting entrenched in, we can't do this, we can't do that. Well, what can we do, and how do we do it more effectively? Because clearly, regardless of what we think, there is a feeling that we need to have more close communication, and 5 or 10 minutes on an agenda once a month doesn't cut it. And I think later on we'll address that with some new ideas around community forums and such. But that's how I see it. I see we have to get closer to the community to hear voices and do a better job of it.
So Jeffrey, I'll tell you that from somebody who's been on the council for the 60
1 second, okay?
and who has had less than positive experiences with being censored consistently, I can tell you that your experiences are not necessarily what the rest of the council has seen. So please respect that. And I do see the opportunity for increased communication. But to disregard...
Miles, go outside to finish this call. Thanks. Go ahead, Koch.
He can't.
Susan, mute.
Disregard
Your phone.
of the rest of the
I don't know how to
council
mute.
responses or not posted, I think is also short-sighted.
And Katia, that's again, I'm not disagreeing. So,
Actually,
excuse me.
it sounded like you did disagree.
No. What I'm saying is that we've had different experiences, and I just want to put out I've had very good ones. But with that said, I think what we need to do is figure out a mechanism where everyone feels comfortable that we have an exchange forum more regular, but everyone feels it's the right forum. So that's it. Over.
Okay.
So I'm
Thanks.
going to weigh in a second here. Also, this has been very frustrating for me. I'm sure for many of the others, very frustrating for me. My natural instinct is to respond to every single email I see coming through, listserv or otherwise, just to acknowledge, let alone respond where I can. I think for me, I joined the council in January, and I think part of the frustration is that our government restrictions that hover over us, that I can't have a conversation with more than one member of the council at a time. It's handcuffing. And then to feel like, well, if I want to respond on the listserv and get into more detail, in fairness, I need to make sure that I'm representing my fellow council members in doing that. And yet I'm not able to go ahead and pull all of them together without calling a meeting.
Or perhaps not, because in every other place in the world, people can say, I'm a member of the council and this is how I feel. If you feel handcuffed, and whoever said you feel that you're being censored by the listserv, clearly we've isolated a problem. None of us has the ability in a tiny little village to speak to each other in the way that people in big cities and medium-sized cities can speak to each other. Todd, you feel handcuffed? I feel like people aren't speaking. Somebody else feels like the listserv isn't responding to them. I'm not trying to take up all your time. I'm just saying perhaps we have isolated a problem in communication, and perhaps that gives us an opportunity to solve it.
But I think I certainly agree with you that this has been an episode for all of us in finding that, in two ways, really. One is addressing how do we communicate as a council when these things happen? How do we really reach out to the community? And then secondly, what's a good process for finding yourselves introducing a proposal and then realizing, oh my God, it's bigger than we thought. It's bigger than we realized. And what is a better process for making sure that we get feedback from the community at the very start of this before we move forward with proposing things? So I think there's a lot to take away from this. So without my handcuffs on, I'll just say I felt terribly about about feeling like I couldn't respond to the community that supports the council. It was equally frustrating knowing how all of us on the council felt, unable to and support but unable to communicate. So I would like to take this opportunity to feel good about falling on my sword and feeling badly about not responding and not being able to address it. But I will say that I think that I'd like to work with my fellow council members and our legal counsel and saying where can we respond and how, and also find a different process for moving forward.
Can I ask a question?
Of course.
It was very hard to find the link to this meeting. I didn't see anything sent out by the council. Did the council send
Right,
a
there
link
was
out?
an email that was sent out with the link for the meeting. It was sent out yesterday. And then I also added, this morning I added the link and everything to the calendar on the website, and it is on the second page of the agenda, which can also be found on the website.
Okay.
And I apologize if you didn't get it, but that was what I tried to put it everywhere I could think of. So.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Apparently I didn't get it.
If I just jump in really quickly, and maybe it's because I'm technologically challenged. I'm not saying that anybody else is, but I certainly am. I do have a difficult time finding the link as well. So I wonder if it's possible to send out a reminder maybe 30 minutes before the meeting, like a scheduled one, so you don't have to stay in the office to do that necessarily. Just with the pertinent information of here's the link, and here's, the dial-in number that you need to know.
Certainly, and that is not a problem. I can resend it 30 minutes before the meeting.
Thank you so much.
Okay, anyone
So
else?
Susan, would you still like me to respond with some of the legalities?
I would
regarding
like
the
that. I
listserv?
think it would clarify. Please.
Okay, sure. And Todd covered most of it, but let me just say by way of background, and historically, the council has communicated with residents in between meetings by offering on the website the council members' individual phone numbers and email addresses. And those are, in fact, on the website now. The problems with the private listserv are many. Todd covered most of them. We are, as a government, subject to the Open Meetings Act, and the Open Meetings Compliance Board has explained recently that a meeting can take place if there's a quorum of council members, 3, engaged in an email discussion. And so the act can be triggered inadvertently if, for example, council members are joining an email discussion and there's at least 3 of them. And if you haven't followed through the procedural steps required by the Open Meetings Act, you would have violated the act. The Open Meetings Act says you need to send public notice of your intent to convene a meeting and then give the public the opportunity to participate. Now, that presents its own problems because not everybody's on the listserv, so you can't really give everybody notice that a meeting is taking place, and you can't always plan in advance your comments on a listserv. But also, and perhaps this needs to be rethought given the COVID-19 pandemic, communities are thinking about what better ways to take advantage of social media and the like, given the need to conduct remote meetings and to communicate with residents through electronic means. In the past, folks could just come up to the village office if they needed information, but it's not an option now. But the problems with a private listserv, as Todd noted, it is private, so we can't dictate who's allowed to say what and when. And there have been some unfortunate issues in the past which have led some folks to believe that maybe the moderation of that listserv is or isn't objective. But more importantly, from the legal standpoint, because it's a private listserv, we can't control the content. And if there's content posted on the website that is problematic, that's tortious or presents other issues, we don't want to be held liable for it. And because it's a private listserv, we can't protect ourselves because we're not moderating it. We don't have that capability. And if council members nevertheless treat a private listserv as an official means of communication, we may be inadvertently converting it into a public listserv and then taking on liability for it.
So, Ron, what is the extent to which any one of us on the council can chime in, weigh in, other than saying thank you for your note on the listserv, without it being construed as government policy? Because that's really what the crux of the.
Why do you pull them?
That's what he wanted me to do.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the comment.
No, I think that was, I don't know, that somebody was talking.
Okay. Well, it depends on the circumstances. There's nothing wrong with saying thank you for the comment. I'm happy to give you a call, discuss this with you privately, but we can't discuss it on the listserv because as soon as 2 other council members do, then we've created a meeting under the Open Meetings Act. But also, as Todd noted, it's been the village's general practice to try and just have one public spokesperson when there is an issue of this magnitude, so that we are not inadvertently conveying mixed messages or creating policy inadvertently, because the village council creates policy only by majority vote. Individual council members cannot. Think for a moment how it must feel to a council member to have the question raised, how can I talk to the people who voted for me? And the answer to be, we really don't know how to do that.
Well, right now, you can pick up the phone and call them. Their phone numbers are on the website, as well as their emails. But, that can be rethought. The council can discuss other ways to facilitate communication.
And this is Jeff here. I just want to put this out because I don't think we're going to resolve this here, but and again, maybe there are different municipalities and local, structures that have maybe they have different ways of doing business. But there are certainly other places that use listservs, perhaps not private, but certainly through the management structure. And I think maybe we take it upon ourselves to investigate, especially as you mentioned, Ron, in the time of COVID, are there things we can do a bit differently, listserv or otherwise, or does it have to be these individual calls and emails? Because that can be frustrating.
Sure, yeah. The town of Somerset, for
great.
example, recently created a public listserv that's moderated by the mayor. It's possible. It's just more administrative burden.
So I think that one of the things I'd like us to work on.
That tonight?
But could I ask somebody, if you're not speaking, put your phones on mute.
Yeah, thanks.
Somebody's coming over.
Thanks, Arthur. So
You're gonna have to.
Thanks for trying.
You're gonna have to turn this off.
I will. I can mute some of the people just right now, so I will.
Thank you. So I'd like us to, tagging on to Jeff's suggestion, I'd like us to figure out what kind of communication vehicle we can use to be able to chime in, respond, even if we have to move it to a different type of platform, if it evolves to needing that, just so that we feel like we can communicate as council members to the people of the community. We're here to serve. And I think we need to be able to do that. I don't know what the answer is, but certainly we know what the challenge is that we have to try and figure out.
In the alternative, there are rarely issues that command the attention of more than 2 residents at a time. And we're able to deal with those one-on-one without a lot of difficulties in communicating. So it might be an alternative to when going forward, if something generates so much community interest, to schedule a forum then, rather than going to the office managed listserv, which would require a lot of resources, I think. Maybe not.
There would have to be some investigation. Sorry, I didn't know she was looking at me.
Yeah.
I think it's a question of how we do it and what is required of a. I'd have to look at, like, for example, what Somerset does, just to get a sense of how they deal with it and how council members respond and things like that. But I can do the research, so we can start there. How's that sound?
That sounds great.
But let's see what others do, so that we feel that we can indeed respond. And all the more frustrating when we know that there's a similar sense among members of the council, yet we can't. We're lacking the ability to say so, and it may just be that we kind of hold the presses a little bit and say, let's all regroup with the community before we go further. So lots of good lessons learned. Thank you, Phil, for summarizing. I know the feelings that you have from others.
Thank you all for giving me the opportunity to talk. It's nice to talk with you.
Thank you.
I see the Margolis family is raising their hand. There may be others.
Hi, thanks. I'm Aletta Margolis. This is my daughter Isabel here on Turner Lane. I just wanted to say thank you to the council for your volunteer work. I've been on many nonprofit boards in my life. I appreciate the incredible amount of time it takes and the navigating these complexities of following the law and at the same time being accessible. So I really appreciate that. I also appreciate the incredible energy and engagement of my neighbors around this issue, and it was wonderful engaging with you on this, and I'm so happy people really stepped up and rose to the occasion. And I just took a look, as was suggested a few moments ago, at the minutes from the previous meeting to see if I myself could answer the question of where this proposal came from. The minutes are 52 pages long, and so I haven't gotten that far through them. So may I ask now, officially on the record in the middle of a meeting, please can you tell us where did this proposed ordinance come from so that we can understand the context?
Ron, would you like to summarize it?
Sure. So there was a sign that was posted over top of an official street sign, and that brought to attention the fact that the village currently does not have express regulations governing what private signs are allowed in the right of way. And so, looking at what some other towns do, a draft ordinance was prepared for discussion, not prepared as a fait accompli, that it was certainly not a recommendation that something has to be adopted. It was just prepared at the request of a council member just for discussion, not knowing what would actually happen to it, not knowing whether the council would actually find it was necessary. And, I can say certainly there was no sinister motive behind it. It was not politically motivated. It was just a recognition that there's currently nothing in the code that addresses whether private signs can be posted in the right of way.
And as everyone has been asking for days, what was the content of the offensive sign?
That I don't know.
Does anyone know the content of the sign that was offensive that led to this?
I think there were a number of signs posted. I would not say the content was offensive. It was rather the placement on traffic signs and creating the visual sightline issues. But I think that one of them was...
What was the content of the sign?
I think there was a Black Lives Matter sign. I think there were like generic vote signs with scan the
QR code.
QR. I was going to say QR. There was no issue with the content, but
one of the signs
they were on stops. I'm sorry.
But one of the signs was a Black Lives Matter sign, and taking it down, while not of evil intent, could certainly be seen as offensive by those who...
And that actually is a problem. I think just
yes, it is.
The fact that it was placed there, the fact that there is a right to place, that someone perceived a right to place it there because there were no express regulations, creates an issue when someone takes it down because it's interfering with their ability to see oncoming traffic. I live at a busy corner where a lot of kids play, and there were multiple signs placed on at least 2 or 3, actually 3 at least, traffic poles or traffic sign poles, and they remained there, but it created a problem. So that was sort of the genesis.
May I chime in for a moment, please? My name is Camille, and I'm still relatively new to the neighborhood, and I'm learning a lot, and I appreciate it. I'm not on the listserv. I only heard about its existence in the last couple of days, and I appreciate this additional information. Is there any documentation of these egregious signs? Because today I went around the entire village and I documented every sign that was posted, and there were few. And I am very curious about who it was that brought this to the office and what their motivation was. Was it simply because there was just one sign posted on a traffic sign and they had nothing else to complain about? Or what exactly happened there?
I can tell you that many of the signs just sort of were eroded over time by heavy rains. No one, as far as I know, took any down except from stop signs. Anything else? I think the person...
Right, so I think the one other thing to just sort of put out there is that no one no one ever contacted the office about removing signs. No one complained and said that a sign should be removed. Okay. The question.
Niles, get in the picture.
Sorry. Yeah. The question that was brought up was, and this is related to having signs on traffic signs and having all these things, was about the placement of signs in the right of way. Can there be signs in the right of way? No one, as I said, no one complained about any sign, and no one requested that a sign be removed. And no sign was, the village office did not remove any sign. Okay, so all of those
signs
things
were deemed egregious, as
right. None of
the commenters made the comment that the signs were egregious. That determination was never made. It was simply a question of, should there be rules?
Yes.
For signs in the right of way.
That's
a question for the council, but
yes,
the council's determined. I think the intent has been misunderstood. Again, it wasn't aimed at being a political initiative, and the council's just decided it's best that if we just take it off the agenda. It's not an issue that needs to be decided, and there's no plan to bring it back.
Yeah, I still am.
If it presents an issue in the future, maybe the council would discuss it again. But at this time, there's no intent to proceed.
Well,
I'm still.
Camille, go. Sorry, I just want to comment.
Sorry. No, I'm just still unclear, and perhaps because I'm new and haven't been connected before, but I had seen in the news about a woman taking issue with Black Lives Matter signs that were being posted near the village and in June, and her taking them down. And so that's the first issue I had ever heard of any issue with signage. I've always seen signs, but in the neighborhood, there's one for a lost cat on a utility pole, and another for this meeting. And then there was one that was formerly a Black Lives Matter that has been so washed away that it's just a shard. But that's really all that I have seen. And so I'm confused and perplexed still if that person and that issue that they were having has anything to do with this, because the timing just doesn't make sense to me with the limited things that I know. And if there was just really some things on utility poles and one thing on a traffic sign, and someone said, oh, this shouldn't be on a traffic sign to the village, and that's all that kicked it off, I'm just not sure I'm understanding.
Or why the village enlarged the whole issue to include virtually all signs on private property, rather than just stating you can't, prohibition of signs on traffic signs, which totally makes sense. Or even
particularly because
broad statement.
Yeah, and it hadn't ever seemed to be an issue before, and I've never seen a problem, and the community has a certain charm about it, to have that kind of small town feel where people post something about their lost cat. And the fact that this is all happening now, I would assume that the council had documented some sort of evidence of signage that was inappropriate, because if there is a need for an ordinance, it should be arising from a true documented problem. And if there is a documented problem, I'd like to see the documentation, and I'd like to better understand the problem. Otherwise, I don't think there's any need to even propose an ordinance and waste your time and your skills and your goodwill and your service in pursuit of something like that.
Yeah, again, there's no documented problem. The problem that was identified was that the code doesn't address it one way or the other. And so the issue was put before the council to discuss whether or not it's a problem and whether the code should be amended to expressly address it. But, quite frankly, it's bad timing. And the optics are bad because of the political climate. And, nothing sinister was intended, but because of the political climate, there is great skepticism, and that skepticism has us rethinking everything in life. And so the agenda item is just going to be taken off. Well,
I don't suspect the council for anything sinister whatsoever, and I want to make that clear. I have great faith in the council, but I don't understand the motivation of whoever it was that brought it to the attention of the council to begin with, and that's where I'm really seeking some clarity. And if there's some reason why we can't be told, then I'd like to understand that. Otherwise, I really think just put it to bed by telling us.
Camille, there's no there where you're looking. This was self-generated. There were signs on traffic, signs put up on traffic signs, and there was a realization that we did not have an explicit ordinance to deal with it. The ordinance that was proposed by Ron was simply lifted from another jurisdiction as a model of where we could start. So it was not a huge amount of forethought in this. It was, do we have a problem? What could we do with it? What could we do about it? Who else is doing anything about it? And this is was a starting point to ask all these questions. So in a way, there's no there. There was no one bringing charges. There was no sinister intent. There was no nefarious grounds for anything, no ulterior motives. It was rather quite serious, interior,
but in this moment,
and casual.
No one's questioning the motive, but in this moment,
right,
we cannot be saying, let us figure out how we can be supportive of those who need a voice. Let us figure out how we can be supportive of those who have no other way to communicate. Businesses that are dying, Black people who are being harmed by police, people who have no other way to communicate. For us to take that moment to say, we haven't dealt with sign regulation. Let's turn our attention there. Makes us feel terribly tone deaf. This is not a matter of intent. It's a matter of how we spend our time in this moment. Are we trying to amplify voices, or are we trying to do things that will keep our neighborhood a little prettier, or our signs a little cleaner? But are we showing ourselves to be aware of what's going on in the world? And that was the concern that was raised. Not your intent, certainly not your intent, but the fact that we missed what our action would have seemed like.
I
want to recognize the Swerskis. I think they've been very patiently waiting. So please.
Was there a misunderstanding, or did the ordinance also attempt to address signage on private property? Because that's the way I read it, and I
right, yeah. So, and to Susan Post's comment, why does the ordinance include private property as well? And that's how I drafted it, just to facilitate the council's discussion, so the council could see a comprehensive ordinance and discuss what they like or what they don't like. It's easier to take things out than to add things in at an initial discussion. That was just to give the council, what a complete regulatory framework might look like, based on some examples from other jurisdictions. But again, at that point, the council hadn't discussed anything yet, and there was no recommendation. It was just to facilitate a discussion.
Ron, one thing you mentioned, and I just want to put out there, you did mention something like, well, it can come back, right? This could come back. And so one thing, I personally counted well over 70 emails that had been sent to me. And that doesn't include phone or text or anything else. And I'm coming in the middle of this where I think I was sort of after the draft was developed, but after the initial issue was raised on a former council. So I'm kind of coming at this a little bit like the community is around where was the data. But let's focus on the future, which is, and I think we can all agree, perhaps we have to think a little bit about what is the process. So, for example, is there a process of a certain level of evidence, or you have to go through a committee, or so it's not just, I don't know, but I think the issue here seems to be the community feels that they weren't involved enough in the decision making of why we even went to this point. And so the idea is, well, we don't want to get back to this again without having a discussion of an SOP or something where when you get to a point of creating an ordinance, perhaps there needs to be a certain basic minimum of data or information or committee or something that does that. And I'm speaking to you, I mean, I have a PhD in epidemiology, and so I'm data driven, right? I'm evidence driven. So I'm all for anything that justifies public safety, right? I have a daughter who's 8 years old, and the last thing I want is a car that is obstructed because something's in the right of way and it could harm her. But with that said, I really also want to make an informed decision that any policy that we're going to implement is really going to make that happen. So I just put that out there. I don't think we'll get to the answer on this discussion, but the real issue is if we go forward on this, that the community feels there's a comfort level of what is the diligence around the process of raising the bar from an incident to actually trying to implement policy. Okay.
That's very well put, and that would take care of some of my concerns. Is there a process that includes a public comment period before something is enacted?
Yeah, so the legislative process is generally as follows. You know, an issue is brought to light, council discusses it, directs the attorney to prepare an ordinance. The ordinance must be introduced by the council. It must be approved for introduction to the public by majority vote. And then after it is so introduced, it's scheduled for a public hearing, usually the following month, but doesn't necessarily have to be the following month. And then the public is given the opportunity to comment. The council hears all the comments and then decides whether to approve, amend, or deny the ordinance as presented. And that's the typical procedure, but it doesn't always have to be that formal. Oftentimes things are discussed for many, many months before an ordinance is even drafted. And some of you may recall that's what the village did when it comprehensively amended its building regulations in 2007 and 8.
Thanks, Ron. Anyone else like to comment?
Hi, this is Amanda. I'd just like to propose, and I apologize that I know this may not be the correct process, but I'd like to put out there that I think the reason so many of us are really upset is the appearance of racism associated with this, whether or not that was the actual intent, and I'm not suggesting it was. It does sound, thankfully, based on this conversation, that it was not. But I think this presents a wonderful opportunity for us as a community to proactively state what we do stand for and to figure out a way to make a statement of support for the Black community among us. So I'd like to propose that we consider some sort of signage.
No, I'm listening to
that we could potentially include at the village office, maybe.
Yeah, but right before I think even anyone's talked.
Hang on one second. And I'll mute that one as well. Sorry, go. Amanda, you can unmute. I was just muting someone so that you could hear.
It looks like you muted everybody, Niles.
Oh.
That should.
I was just proposing that we find a way for us as a village to proactively show our support for the Black community. One potential idea would be to actually have some sort of signage that we post within the village office. But I'm open to other ideas of ways we might be able to show our community support.
Yeah, and if I could just mention, Susan, that the Maryland Municipal League, of which we are a member, and many communities across the country are looking at ways to take affirmative action to proactively address systemic racism. And at the same time this ordinance was drafted, another ordinance was drafted. It's not yet been introduced, but to amend our code of ethics to affirmatively put in our code of ethics that discrimination is grounds for removal of a council member or a committee member. And, that's being considered by the council currently, although, again, that draft's not reached the introduction stage.
All right, thanks.
And this is Jeff here, Susan. Again, these are all up for discussion and not for necessarily immediate implementation, but there are other sections of Chevy Chase that have created committees around this, resident committees. So there's like an inclusion committee that another, Chevy Chase Village, I think, created. So, again, if there is enough of a attraction here and enough residents who are interested, there are mechanisms through the residents themselves that you can create committees, or if there isn't enough, momentum within our own, because we are a smaller catchment area, there may be a chance to join the committees in some of the other sections, and that might also be an avenue.
I think all we're asking for is a sign outside the village office that says that we support Black Lives Matter and condemn racism. I don't think we have to turn this into some big formal regulation. Let's take a position as a community. How do we feel?
Okay.
I'd like to address one issue that came up about the process of introducing ordinances. There's nothing secret about it, as Ron had noted. They're noted in agendas. They're put in the minutes. You can, with Zoom these days, you can be very easy to attend all the meetings. But you do have to make an effort. We don't go around and place ordinances on everybody's doorstep. So as Woody Allen once said, 80% of success is showing up.
I think it's
so if
99.
you want to know what's going on, you have to participate and put a little bit of energy into it. But it's there. It's all there. Nothing is.
The problem with this process has been that the community didn't participate enough. Is a little bit offensive, Arthur. We've been trying to participate. We've been asking for days. What's the reason for this? And if we didn't ask in the right way, and read those minutes, that's not really what we should be talking about.
To chime in, because I actually was going to speak to what Arthur said. I was actually one of the initial people who was disturbed by this ordinance, because I was one of a very small handful of residents who attended the July meeting. And that's just what I was going to say, is that we don't need another committee before an ordinance. What we need is just more residents like myself and Keith Allen and Susan Post, people who, try to kind of jump into these meetings here and there where we can and participate and listen to what's going on with the council, because that ordinance was out there a lot, in July, and it was kind of through emails here and there that finally the word kind of got out to other members. But I mean, I think that's a piece too, that, on one hand, we elected these council members to represent us. And so we are holding them accountable, but at the same time, I think we still have our civic duty to continue to sort of be engaged, from, to the extent that's possible. And I think that's a little bit of the missing piece here, is that we're not always, paying attention, and to some extent we do have to take responsibility for that. So, and I'm the one who put the BLM in front of this, in front of the, on Sidewalk Chalk, just so you know. So, I'm fully in, opposed to this ordinance and everything, but I also feel like we have to respect our council, in terms of us being responsible for showing up.
To come back to where this started, and perhaps find a way for us to end the conversation, and I appreciate all the time you guys have taken to listen to us. In a moment like this, when the community, stupid and unhelpful and dongling along as we are, finally do realize what's going on and do start engaging, we would love for there to be a process. Once we've said, hey, sorry we missed it, but there's a thing going on. Can you tell us what's happening? What we found out tonight is that Ron and Todd and Arthur and you all seem to agree that we heard you, and we don't have any way that we know how to respond in that moment. How are we allowed to talk? I can't talk on the listserv. If three of us talk, it's a meeting. We don't know how to respond. And that's all I'm saying, is in this moment, when we do finally get our voices out there, how can you guys engage with us in a way that's not frustrating for you and not frustrating for us? That's what I think is what we're talking about tonight.
Pick up the phone. I've had a number of telephone calls where we've had good conversations.
But that doesn't spread to the community. That doesn't spread to the community. So the conversation on the listserv goes on and on with all of us.
Words, Arthur, in these times of Zoom, it's very easy for you to communicate with all of us.
Susan, there's somebody, Jetru wants to be heard.
I'm sorry.
Unmute.
It's Janine Trudeau from
Janine, hi.
I just think you're just not going to get the information from the listserv. It is what it is. People can't. I know people. I'm able to post things on there. I know that for a fact there are other people that aren't. So it's a private. It's got its own quirk. So expecting to get info and a dialogue going on that listserv, it's very helpful for what it is, and you got to show up and look at, how many times have you gone to meetings? I haven't seen you guys. I've been to a few, and there's less than a handful, and it's great that it's got you paying attention. And I hate hearing, because I know the council people, and everybody starts spinning into conspiracy theories, or like there's some specific bad thing there, and it really isn't about you personally. There isn't anything here. Everybody's doing things in good faith. They're trying to promote planting trees and getting community events together.